Deconverted Man here, and today I'm going to be looking at a video uploaded by YouTuber Inward Burn. Edward Burn's video is entitled "The Lives of Atheists Provide Evidence of a God." And in this video, he gives a number of questions that he then answers. While doing so, he produces a number of logical fallacies. Let's analyze this, shall we? First and foremost, he has an appeal to a small sample, mainly himself. He says, "This is how I behave, so therefore this is how things are," essentially. Then he admits that he doesn't understand certain things, which is nothing more than an argument ad ignorance. Then he makes the statement that if there's no God and morality is subjective, then X, Y, and Z are true, which is nothing more than an argument to consequence. Then he says if society determines morality, then X person is wrong, and he does this 4 different times, so 4 more arguments to consequences. He makes a statement about where he thinks this came from, which is a irrelevancy because statements of beliefs are not part of argumentation. It doesn't matter what you believe or do not believe. He produces a formal fallacy when he fails to provide an argument saying that things do not come from energy and or matter. He doesn't provide any reason for us to agree with that position. Then he once again states that if there's no God, then everything is subjective. And again, this is an argument to consequences. And then he says, finally, if there's no God, then this is the best that it can be, which is, again, nothing more than an argument to consequence. So, Inward Burns, you've produced a total of 11 logical fallacies. And because of these logical fallacies, I, and every other skeptic, must be skeptical of your position. Now, let me try, if I could, to explain the problem to you, and maybe you'll learn something from this, maybe you'll ignore what I'm telling you. If X is true, then bad thing will happen. Therefore, X cannot be true. This is an appeal to consequence. Just because bad thing will happen, that doesn't mean X thing is not true. It might be that, yes, X thing is true and bad thing is going to happen as a result. That doesn't mean it's not true. It doesn't mean that we have to pretend it's not true. It just means, yeah, that bad thing's going to happen. And tough patooties, that's the way it is. Getting to the truth is best done when we utilize logic and the rigors of the scientific method. When we instead turn to our own intuitive thinking and our own beliefs and our own ideas, what we come up with is logical fallacies. It might be the case that there's a God, but then that says nothing about whether or not morals are objective or not, because these two things are independent of each other. There are religions that claim that there's a God, but morals are subjective. And there are religions that claim that there is no God, but there's objective morals. There are also secular people who claim that morals are objective even though there is no God. And there are secular people who claim that morals are subjective and it doesn't matter whether or not there's a God. If the law of the land declared tomorrow that we all had to wear a hat, we would either have to wear a hat or go to jail. We can protest, in theory, the wearing of hats, and many people might choose to protest this by not wearing hats. Those individuals will go to prison. That does not mean that the wearing of hats is right or wrong. It merely means that the laws of the land have declared that it is illegal to do this. The civil rights movement succeeded because people slowly realized that what we call utilitarian ethics are the best ethics to utilize for society. Utilitarian ethics are essentially do the most good for the most people. Suppressing or repressing people is not the most good that we can do. Telling people that they have to do something rather arbitrary, or they're not allowed to do something rather arbitrary, is not beneficial to society as a whole. Preventing women from voting doesn't help society. Preventing blacks from voting doesn't help society. How does preventing a man marrying a man help society? People have made arguments against this, saying, well, it's morally wrong because of my religion. Well, couldn't the Muslims make the same sort of argument that it's morally wrong for women to go outside without massive amounts of clothing on? Are we going to allow people to use their religions, whatever those religions are, to dictate what society does? If we are, then we're going to have a consequence to that. If we are not, then there's a consequence of that. There is no good argument for why homosexuals should not be married at all. Yet, you and others like you who promote the idea that morals are objective because of God utilize the idea that God, specifically your God, gave us this set of rules that we all have to live by as a source to say that you now have the right to tell others what to do. But utilitarian ethics says the complete opposite. It says that the most amount of good that we can do for people is to allow the most amount of people to have freedom. As much freedom as we can. And that sometimes leads to bad consequences. At least under your ideas of what it means to be moral. It might seem immoral to you for a man to marry a man. But for society, it makes sense for a man to marry a man because that promotes more freedom, and promoting more freedom is better for society. You use the idea that rape is wrong in your argumentation. In the Bible, rape is not only right if commanded by God, but it is allowed multiple times by God. Lot has a story that he essentially allows his daughters to be raped by the entire village rather than sending out the angels to suffer the same fate. God never tells Lot that what he did is wrong. Does God essentially give his okay to rape by not saying that it's wrong? God doesn't punish Lot directly for that action. Am I to infer that God thinks rape is okay by that story? I could if I wanted to. Why? Because my reading of any text, including the Bible, is subjective to my own brain. So, by your own standards, that means that your God hasn't produced objective morality, which means your God can never be the real God. There might be a real God, but it wouldn't be your God. What is God then? If God's existence hinges upon objective morality, all I have to do is find one case where morality is not objective, and I've disproven every single God. Is this really what you want to hinge God's existence upon? I would suggest that it is not. First of all, because there's no logically coherent argument to show that because God exists, therefore morals are objective. Secondly, it's all based on feelings rather than objectiveness. If we are to make an argument, why not make an argument about mathematics? Mathematics is objective, and no one can say that it isn't. If mathematics is objective, then God exists. Could be an argumentation that one could use, and it relies not on feelings at all. It's still not a very good argument because it has yet to produce the other key factors of an argument to show why that this must be the case. The premises are missing. You can't just say because B is true, C is true. You need more than that for a good argumentation to work. If you don't understand that, then you don't understand logic, and you have shown to me by your misunderstanding of logic that you do not care enough to do the bare minimum that will convince me of your case. So by your actions, you're essentially saying, yeah, sure, I want you to be converted, but I'm too lazy to do it. So you really don't want me to be converted because you're not doing the work necessary to convert me. You need to try harder. And the only way you can do that is to learn logical argumentation. Learn informal logic. Learn what the fallacies are. And learn why this particular argument hasn't worked in the past and why it's not going to work in the future. If you continue to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that's the definition of insanity. So don't be surprised when we skeptics shrug it off and roll our eyes at you and maybe even laugh at you. It's because you're doing something that's not going to convince us. You're doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And that's just not good enough. If you really and truly care about this particular God, then prove it to me and other skeptics by providing us with a logical, coherent argument. And unless and until you do, we're going to continue to be skeptical of your position.